So this week I actually made a list of the remaining plot points that are left to be addressed / resolved in Onigashima. So once Oda checks these off, we can move on and then have the party that Luffy said he wanted to have. But then also, thanks to this chapter, we have a brand new plot point that also needs to be addressed now, which is Zoro's situation with death. And speaking of Zoro, we got a brand new statue of him in Kumamoto, Japan, which is Oda's hometown. And so obviously the pose of the statue is the one that Zoro chose for himself back in Little Garden. So it's very character appropriate. The swords of the statue are the same ones that he currently has in the manga, which are Enma, Wado Ichimonji, and Sandai Kitetsu. And so it's kind of interesting to think about the level of permanency of those three swords, specifically Enma and Sandai Kitetsu. Or it could be like a thing about like, well, since Wano is based on Japan, and the statue is in Japan, we'll just give Zoro the swords that he currently has in Wano. I do think that Enma and Wado Ichimonji are permanent. Wado Ichimonji because that's the sword of the promise. And then he also has to turn Enma into a black blade. So the only one that's like in question is Sandai Kitetsu. We start off in Cacao Island, more specifically Chocolate Town. And this is something that I didn't think we were going to get, which is that we're going to get to spend more time in Big Mom's territory. Because we see that Niji and Yonji have been captured inside of Montior's picture book. So I'm guessing that the other Vinsmokes will be coming back to save them, right? To free them. So the two of them are trapped there, and we know from Big Mom that if you get stuck or you get trapped in the picture book, you don't really age. You just stay there, lingering unchanged, just like the words or the pictures of a book. So I think it'd be interesting to see the Vinsmokes eventually free even more prisoners from Big Mom's picture book library. We see Pudding there, and we know that she obviously has feelings for Sanji. So I'm guessing that she could do something to Oven's memories to be able to free the Vinsmoke siblings there. Regardless, just being able to see the Big Mom children that didn't get to go to Wano with her, right? I think this pretty much guarantees that we're gonna end up seeing Katakuri at some point during this cover story. Start off with Raizo versus Fukurokuju continuing their endurance battle or endurance test. And again, I think it's a very clear echo to Odin and the boiling temperature that he had to withstand. So I guess the winner is going to come down to whoever can stand the heat longer, even though Raizo is already at a very clear disadvantage. We move on to the second floor to see some samurai be saved from getting squashed by the ceiling, and they get saved by none other than Jinbei. And so I feel like that comment from Jinbei is sort of Oda telling the reader, hey, you can't relax just yet. You got to keep worrying because even though most of the fights are over, we still have this fire to deal with. And if people die being burned, then that's even worse than if they had died fighting. It's because Oda likes introducing these ticking time bomb mechanisms, narrative ticking time bombs near the end of arcs. So it's a threat with a timer to it. There's like a ticking clock. So in Fishman Island, it was the Noah, the ark, falling onto the island. We had to stop that. In Punk Hazard, it was the gas spreading. In Dressrosa, it was the birdcage. In Whole Cake Island, it was, we gotta get Big Mom her wedding cake before she destroys everything. And so here in Wano, it's Onigashima catching fire and potentially crashing into the flower capital. And so it's definitely a pattern that Oda has. And so because it is a pattern, I think the biggest question is, do you find this threat to be believable here? Because if we go back to previous arcs, we notice that for the most part, people actually end up being fine after these things. We then head back to the live floor to see Tristan and Miyagi, and we find that Chopper has gone back to his usual self. Chopper says that he's worried about Zoro, and I think it's a pretty good reminder for the reader about the effects of the mink medicine, which is that it was a super fast recovery drug, right? It healed Zoro up, but now he's going to have to suffer twice as much. Or feel twice as much pain. And so Chopper's words are a pretty good segue into Zoro fighting himself face to face with death. Now, my most obvious thought about this, my most basic idea about this whole thing is that the side effects of the mink medicine are interfering or altering Zoro's perception of reality. So I think it's actually just Brook with his cane, and he's about to help Zoro up. Because I actually went back and checked to see when we saw Brook and Robin last, and the area where we saw them last, which was kind of like the same area where we saw Yamato at one point, it's not very far from where Zoro is right now. So I do think it's going to turn out to be Brook, and not just for that reason, but also because Brook has been underused in this arc. So this could potentially give him something to do that I think is interesting, so that's good. Knowing Oda, though, this could also be a continuation of the gag that he has sort of established established for Brook, which is that people tend to mistake him for death or a ghost. If you remember, Brook's current goal is to protect Robin, right? Because they were being chased by ZB0, so maybe Brook found a disguise, maybe he found a cloak and a scythe, and so maybe he's using that disguise to hide and protect Robin. So maybe Robin is actually hiding underneath the cloak. But then also I feel like this could be a great opportunity for Zoro to reaffirm his dream, because just recently he said that he wanted to become the king of hell, so just the fact that he's facing death is very thematically fitting. But then the scene also takes us back to this quote that Zoro has in Arlong Park, where he says that until he meets Mihawk again, not even death himself can take his life away. So it could also be something similar to Itachi's Tsukuyomi, where he traps his victims in like this illusion world or this world of his own that's specifically designed for the victim to experience torture. And so maybe the side effects of the mink medication is similar, where the person who uses the medicine ends up experiencing incredible amounts of psychological torture and trauma as a side effect. So again, we could end up getting like another Thriller Bark moment here with Zoro, where like this pain or these illusions end up testing his willpower. Now, if it turns out that Brook is actually death himself, I think that would be a great thing too, because the impression that I got from this chapter is that it's almost like it's setting up Chopper to do something here. And so if this is also setting up Brook to do something, I think that would be really, really good. Because like out of the Straw Hats in Wano, in Onigashima, I think Brook, Chopper, and Usopp have been neglected or haven't done as much as I would have wanted them to do. So if those three characters are about to get some shine, I'm all for it. But then also if Robin is right there with Brook, hiding underneath the cloak, that could also be very helpful, because I remember, after Luffy defeated Lucci, he was in the exact same situation that Zoro was here, where he couldn't move. And so Robin had to use her Devil Fruit power to help Luffy out of that situation. So maybe something similar ends up happening here with Zoro as well. We get a brief scene with Frankie, who's also on his way to finding Zoro, so it seems like, at least several Straw Hats will be reuniting very soon. We get a shot of the burning attic space between the first and second floor, which is where we saw Usopp, Kinemon, and Kiku a little while ago. That's where they left Izo at, and we actually get to see Izo jump out of there, and we see that he's bleeding out of the abdomen, so he got wounded. And I think the reason for why this shot is important is because I do believe that Izo is going to be defeated by these two ZB0 agents. There's an air of mystery around them that I think needs to be revealed before the end of the arc. And so I do think that that shot of Izo's wound is sort of there to sort of point at, like, if he gets defeated by these guys, you can always say, well, Izo was wounded and he wasn't at full strength, and so that's why he lost. But then also maybe Marco can show up to heal Izo up and give him a hand in the fight or something. So maybe it'll be up to Marco to finish these guys off. We get a double-page spread of Yamato running down the stairs to get to the lowest level of the basement, and something that I feel obligated to mention is that those bombs at the bottom, especially after they get frozen, they look so much like the bombs in the Legend of Zelda games. It just kind of gave me that dungeon feel of like, Yamato found some bombs. Great. Now you can use your ice magic to freeze them. And so that's what hybrid form Yamato ends up doing, using an attack called Nemuji Hyoga, or Nemuji Glacier Fang. The name Nemuji refers to a Japanese god. He was one of the main gods of the terrestrial realm, according to Japanese mythology. And this was an attack that Yamato had actually also previously used to be able to match Kaido's Boro Breath while they were fighting on the rooftop. Then Kanjiro's Kazembo actually makes contact with the bombs, begins producing some steam as it tries to defrost them, and then Yamato steps out of hybrid form and prepares a swing. The name of the attack is Mahoroba, and Mahoroba, according to Japanese legend, is a far-off, peaceful place, full of zen, harmony, and quiet. Which is kind of fitting because that's the purpose of the attack, really. If you think about it, the purpose of the attack is to maintain the peace, right? Or at least to stop the island from blowing up. And so whenever we see Yamato use or perform a named attack, there's usually an ancient Japanese legend associated with the name. The Kazembo then starts growing a limb and starts expressing itself as if it were actually Kanjiro. And so I'm guessing this is setting up some kind of a confrontation between Yamato and Kanjiro in terms of ideals. So it could be that Yamato uses Talk no Jutsu to convince Kanjiro to not blow the entire thing up. And the thing is that unless those bombs actually go off, I'm not really worried about the potential damage that Yamato could suffer due to the fire or the steam clash. Because we've literally seen Yamato be able to tank explosions before, but then also tank Kaido's attacks as well. We head back to the life floor to see Big Mom striking the floor with some lightning. We see that Law's already on the floor while Kid is just, getting sent flying. I'm not really sure what kind of attack that is that she's landing on him. However, if we look at the way the impact is drawn and some of the impact lines in the background, it could be that she's actually using Advanced Conqueror's Haki on him, especially because after this, she's actually surprised that Kid is able to get back up. At the end, she has a panel where she says, like, "You're still standing, Kid? How's that possible?" You're just super surprised. And we do know that she was using Conqueror's Haki at some point during the fight, because Usopp was actually lying and pretending that that was his Conqueror's Haki at one point. We see both Kid and Law's crews there, and obviously both of these crews are lacking Killer and Beppo, which is kind of a shame because I still really want Beppo to go Sulong form at some point. Shachi and Penguin aren't there either though, nor are Heat or Wire. And speaking of Kid's crew, I'm a really big fan of the fan theory that proposes Ulti and Page 1 joining Kid's crew. I think that would be a great match, personality-wise. It would make a lot of sense narratively, considering the fact that Ulti already knows Nami and Luffy, and so does Page 1. So you really wouldn't even need to introduce the animosity, because Ulti already hates Nami and Luffy. Plus, Big Mom is pretty much responsible for defeating Ulti and Page 1. So if they eventually find out that Kid played a major role in taking down Big Mom or, dealing with her, that would make the siblings automatically sympathize with Kid because they hate Big Mom because of what she did to them. And so the crews get taken out by Hera's cross lightning attack. The official translation calls the attack God of Lightning Tenjin. Tenjin is also a deity in Japanese mythology. He's also known as the God of the Sky, so that's where that comes from. And then Big Mom says that she wants Hera to take her up to the roof. And if you notice throughout this entire scene, like, there's some very heavy breathing, right? From Big Mom, but also from Kid and Law. Like, Kid and Law are like, just completely panting. But Big Mom, in this scene, like, she's actually wheezing. Like, she's also trying to catch her breath. And she says something to the effect of, like, "You better not be playing with your food again, Kaido," which is something that I remember she complained about as well, that Kaido has this tendency to play with his food, to play with his opponents. And so that kind of takes us back to the previous chapter and explains why it took a while for Kaido to actually use his drunken mode against Luffy. Before Big Mom can go anywhere, however, Law activates his awakening again, and I read some of you guys saying that the word chrome is actually a reference to chromium, or chrome. So I found this bit of information that says that chrome coating is becoming the finish of choice for medical manufacturers of surgical instruments. So of course that relates to Law being a surgeon, because he's actually coating his sword with chrome. So he sticks in the anesthesia, which is undetectable, right? Just phases right through Big Mom's defenses, and then shocks her again from the inside using shock Wille again. Now, because the word Wille is the German word for will, I'm guessing that because this is causing internal damage, it's almost as if Law is actually shocking the will of his opponent. And the reason for why the word is German is because Oda said that if Law were a real person, he would be from Germany. Now, the impact of the attack actually looks more intense this time around. You see those black lines coming out of Big Mom, which I think it'd be kind of cool if that were blood. I mean, I doubt it, but it'd be kind of cool. I mean, I'm guessing the attack has to be stronger this time because Big Mom is actually bigger than the first time Law used it. That's why Law's sword had to extend further than it did the first time as well. And he still manages to make Big Mom bleed out of the mouth, just like he did the first time, only this time it's a bigger version of Big Mom. So I'm guessing that this attack has to be stronger than the first. I definitely think that we're going to get a Haki bloom here from either just Kid or both Kid and Law at the same time. Because the notion that both of these characters are at their limit is something that gets repeated over and over again by the end of this chapter. If you look at the editor's note, right, it even says like, they're risking their lives. They're willing to put their lives on the line. So that's an extreme situation. It's an extreme condition. And so if you remember Rayleigh's words to Luffy, the flower of Haki blooms in extreme situations. And so of course the most obvious Haki boost that Oda could give Kid in this situation would be for him to be able to use Advanced Conqueror's Haki. And so that's kind of why I'm saying that I strongly suspect that the attack that Big Mom lands on Kid in the beginning of this sequence could have been like an Advanced Conqueror's Haki attack. Because if you look at the way that Oda draws Kid on the floor with the wide eyes, right? That's literally identical to the way that Oda drew Luffy after Kaido hit him with the Thunder Bagua. And so we know that Thunder Bagua was coated with Conqueror's Haki. And so eventually Luffy gets hit with enough Advanced Conqueror's Haki attacks to the point where he's able to unlock it for himself. So I could definitely see something similar happening here with Kid. And so the metal beam homies that we're about about to attack Law start getting pulled away, summoned by Kid's magnetism. And so he ends up using them to aid in the construction of this giant structure, which we later find out is actually a giant mechanical bull. And so if you're curious about what the deal is behind this, in an SBS for Volume 95, Oda talked about the animal resemblance of each of the Worst Generation members. So when it came to Kid, he said that Kid would be a fighting bull. So yeah, I guess this is kind of like Kid's Patronus. What I find interesting though is that unlike Law, Kid doesn't use his awakening in this chapter. Because Law's awakening is Kroom, and Kid's awakening is called a sign. So he doesn't use it here, and it kind of makes it seem as if Oda is saving it on purpose. It could be the finishing move of this fight. Because I remember that in chapter 1031, Law asks Kid about his awakening. He says like, so how long does the power hold? And then Kid says, I'm not going to tell you all my secrets right now. So the extent and the longevity of Kid's awakening has to be addressed and revealed at some point here. So maybe that's the ace that Kid has up his sleeve. And so in terms of what this would look like, I'm guessing that it could be something similar to Pain's Chibaku Tensei, where he creates like a main point of attraction, right? Like this little sphere, and that ends up attracting everything around it to itself. So I expect something similar to that, except with Big Mom being the center of attraction. It'd be kind of fitting too, because in Hokage Island, Big Mom is referred to as being an iron balloon, and Kid can manipulate iron. So it'd be fitting to see Kid use his awakening to turn Big Mom into an actual living magnetic iron balloon. And so this whole thing got me to think about that weird floating island that we saw right before we started the time skip, right? Where Capone was in his ship with his men, and then his ship started levitating, right? It started to get pulled up into this giant structure, almost as if the island was sort of magnetic and it was attracting the ship. So I don't know if that has anything to do with maybe the past user of Kid's double fruit. I don't know if that has something to do with the awakening that Kid might show. But it's interesting to think about that maybe some of these islands in the New World are the way they are because of somebody using awakening on them. So for example, right, we know that Punk Hazard turned out to be the way it was because Aokiji and Akainu fought there and permanently changed the weather. So it reminds me of Rouge and that lightning island that he saw in the New World. And so maybe somebody in the past who had Enel's double fruit or the Goro Goro no Mi used its awakening on the island to permanently change its weather. It also gets me to think about Apu and how he found this invisible road, this invisible path in the sky. So maybe that path is invisible because of the awakening of the Suke Suke no Mi. Like maybe somebody who had that awakening turned that path invisible in the past. Kid goes on to say, I'm guessing Kaido's nearly done up there too. Even water droplets can carve stone given enough time. Pressure like a drip, drip, drip that'll never stop. Whoa. Pressure that'll tip, tip, tip till you just go pop. So the name of Kid's attack with the giant bull is called Punk Cornadio. And corna in Italian means horns or horn. And Dio in Italian means God. So I guess you could translate the attack's name as Punk Horn God, which is kind of a funny name because it almost sounds like Punk Corn Dog. And so this is actually another reason for why I think Ulti would be such a perfect match to join Kid's crew, because she loves headbutting things. What's interesting though is that the objective here for both Kid and Law is not necessarily to take down Big Mom, to defeat Big Mom. It's more about stopping her from getting to where Luffy and Kaido are. Like, they don't say we're gonna kill you or we're gonna take you down. The chapter ends with them saying, like, we'd rather die than let you go to the roof. So yeah, the more I think about it, the more I think they're kind of leaning towards trying to trap Big Mom or finding some way of immobilizing her. And so with ZP0 there, I think them trapping Big Mom or stopping her from moving should be enough to get Kid and Law a bounty raise. So the bull attack visually looks really cool, looks really nice. I just really want Kid to show something more than just creating giant metal structures. And I do think that it comes down to Oda sort of placing these limits on other characters that are not Luffy, because at the end of the day, he wants Luffy to outshine everybody. So my hope is that this fight ends with us getting to see something new from both Kid and Law, right? Either in the hockey department or in the Devil Fruit Awakening department. So we'll see if they come up with a brand new combo strategy. The anime is pretty good at foreshadowing sometimes, and so last night, Marco has a line in the episode where he says, "There's no ship bound for the new era for you to take." So I thought that was a pretty interesting line that could be seen as foreshadowing. And that is going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Overall, I thought this was a pretty solid setup chapter. For the most part, it's just a bunch of different shots of the moving pieces that are obviously building towards the finale. So it definitely gets the job done in that regard. Thanks again for watching. Thank you for all of your support. Really appreciate that. Take care. Have a good week, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.